Hi everyone, I'm going to have a presentation about the domestic violence in South Australia. So I'm studied Bachelor of Business before and I was a policeman in Hong Kong around 2012 and 2015. So I'm currently studying in Master of Social Work in Flinders University now. So we'll talk about data of domestic violence first. So around 36% of women in Australia has experienced physical and sexual abuse from people that they know, and 50% of them are abused by other partners or ex-partner. So after the Connell report about the death of Sarah in October 2014, so the South Australia government implemented the policy of taking a stance and a right to safety. So this policy, it is saying that the early warning system and women domestic violence court assistance service and a right to safety 2011 and 2012 are established in the above strategy. So when talking about the vision of the strategy, it means to decrease domestic violence against women by implementing a useful strategy and effective approach. It also announced a lot of current service in South Australia. For example, domestic and family violence service, which is contained family safety framework, SA Police Family Violence Unit and Aboriginal Family Violence Sector Reform. So there are four key directions of the strategy, which is prevention, provision, protection, and performance. So I'm going to talk about how to use the Karabaki. What's the problem presented to be? So the problem presented is domestic violence, which is result in lower social status of women in Australia, lack of understanding of how to protect women who experience violence and abuse, and the responsibility for government is to help women to seek better solution before and after a woman is abused. So the presumption is that the key concept are that any forms of violence against women are intolerant and unacceptable. So any practice of violence involving the threat of violence against women are crucial actions that breach basic human rights. And the key categories are population at risks of domestic violence are also identified as piloted by this policy, namely Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, women experience violence, children, people in contact with homeless, culturally and linguistically diverse population. So the way of problematizing domestic violence has come about. It have increasing trends of domestic violence. Around in 2006, nearly 40% of Australian women have faced physical violence since 50 years old, or 20% of them has faced sexual abuse. So talk about the silence in this policy. So women from Eastern countries think that it is a kind of shame to let others know about the violence. And the role of the woman is low in Aboriginal culture. So the man has highest power in the family. So it's really hard to make a good outcome in this policy. Also, there's two effects, which is included discursive effect in thinking of violence as a strictly linked to women rather than men. So I talk about disseminated on government website and implement by police and service delivery organization, and its points could be critiqued by lobby groups through their own websites and social media. So talk about the hidden problem is that lack of funding So according to the national budget of Australian proclaim reduce 30% of subsidy on service of Aboriginal family violence and homeless, which means it is lack of funding. So lack of funding will increase the burden of individuals at a time of need and is specific comprised of crucial support the woman who is experiencing domestic violence. So that means there are a lot of homeless, child protection service, and had a decline in power of service of homeless to cooperate in the areas of intergeneration weakness and low socio-economic states. So currently, it is reported that Social Development Committee of South Australia discovered that the funding mainly at offering crisis assistance and after helping the highest risky children and women in 2006. So the Safe at Home program reassure the offenders ought to take responsibility for their behavior and detach from their home, permitting victims such as children and women experience violence to stay at their house. Thus, the problem of lacking funding had not yet solved. So I have several suggestions on this. So according to the system theory in social work, the victim system included clinic, schools, social worker, homeless, children, policy, culture, and community. So it needs to increase the funding on that. Thus, like Aboriginal family violence and homeless, and stop financial support for the scheme of the National Partnership Agreement on Homeless People after the year of 2014. So the implication of this policy for social work is there's a lot of depression and anxiety I represent in women who experience violence. They would feel helpless and sad when their close partner abused them. Also, trauma related to violence would make victims difficult to trust another partner or man. So, in the views of system theory, for example, the domestic violence workplace policy allow the employees who experience domestic violence and their colleague can get the departmental help and information such as pay leave. Thank you.